The first new black box ping came through at 3:17, and it wasn't old airline chatter like it should have been. It wasn't a weak little locator pulse either, the kind you catch by accident and then lose again when the boat rolls. This was clean, sharp, like someone was tapping a glass with a spoon in a room that's otherwise dead silent. Then, in the quiet slice between pings, a man whispered numbers like he had his mouth pressed to the microphone. Like the recorder was still warm. Like the crash had happened 5 minutes ago instead of 30 fucking years. 396 hold. I work contract for a company that buys sonar time and sells recoveries. That's the clean word they use. Recovery. Like we're picking up lost luggage. Most of the time I sit in a shipping container bolted to a deck and listen to the ocean breathe through hydrophones, staring at squiggles and timestamps, trying to turn saltwater noise into something a client can invoice. You want the real job description? I sell the illusion that the sea gives things back if you pay enough. It doesn't. But you'd be amazed what rich people will tell themselves when grief and money team up. They'll rent a boat, slap a mission logo on the side, hire a camera guy, and call it closure. They'll say words like finally and dignity and bringing them home. Then they'll get bored the second the waves turn ugly and the coffee runs out, and they'll ask if we can speed it up. This one started as a museum job. Some rich asshole, local name, local ego, wanted closure for a famous crash that went down off the shelf in the late 80s. Tourist brochures still mention it. Old guys still bring it up at the docks like it happened last season. It was one of those flights that became a story people repeat until it stops being about the people and starts being about the weather and the mystery and the romance of the ocean keeping secrets. The airframe never got found. They dragged the area a dozen times back in the day, came up with torn seat foam and a suitcase full of rotten clothes, and they quit. The ocean kept it. Then last week our array picked up a beacon that shouldn't still have battery. My supervisor, Danton, slapped the printout on my console like it insulted him personally. He had that habit, paper as a weapon. He'd walk in with his shoulders squared like he was carrying the whole company on his back, then throw some grimy sheet at you and wait for you to look guilty. "You sure it's not some goddamn prank?" he said. "Some hobby beacon? Some kid with a buoy and a YouTube channel?" "It's not a hobby frequency," I said, because it wasn't. It's an underwater locator beacon signature. Same pulse rate, same spacing. Exactly. Like it woke up. He hated that word. None of them liked it. Woke up. It makes things sound alive, and nobody wants to be the guy who signed a purchase order for something alive. He snatched the paper back and tapped the line on the graph with a thick finger. "We don't say that. It's reactivated. It's intermittent. It's unexplained signal." "It's not intermittent," I said, because it had been steady for an hour and climbing in amplitude. "It's consistent, and it's strong." Danton's jaw worked. He didn't like when the ocean didn't behave like a machine. He didn't like when I sounded sure. "You've got one job," he said, leaning in close enough that I caught his breath. Coffee and that sweet, stale smell of someone who lives on nicotine gum. "You identify. You log. You do not freak out my deck crew with spooky bullshit. You understand me." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just looked at the plot and listened. The container was my world. Steel walls sweating salt. A cheap AC unit that never kept up. Racks of gear screwed into plywood. A console I'd wired together out of corporate leftovers and my own stubbornness. Headphones always hanging, always damp around the cups for my ears. The floor never really dry. You could be 50 miles offshore in clear weather and it would still smell like bilge in there because that smell gets into everything. Diesel, salt, warm metal, veterope, old fish. When the ping hit, it wasn't loud. It was intimate, like the ocean had leaned in. A quick pulse that your brain can't help but count. Your body starts anticipating the next one. That's the trick with regular signals. Your nerves join the rhythm before you decide to. Ping. Half a second of nothing. 396. Ping. Half a second. Oh, the whisper wasn't on any channel it should have been. It wasn't clipped like radio. It wasn't distorted like a contact through water. It sounded like it lived inside the recording equipment itself, like the hardware had remembered how a voice feels. I yanked one headphone cup off my ear and stared at the speakers on the rack like they were going to explain themselves. The cabin around me kept doing its normal song. Whole creaks, the distant slap of waves against the side, the gurgle of seawater running through pipes under the deck. Outside, somebody laughed on the main deck. Somebody dropped something heavy. Life went on. Inside my headphones, a man whispered numbers like he was whispering to me. I logged it, because that's what you do. You don't get to just have a feeling on a paid deck. You put a timestamp on it and you bury it in paperwork so it looks like science. 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 12 seconds. ULB pulse detected. Secondary audio artifact present between pulses. Unidentified human vocalization. I used artifact because Danton liked that word. Artifact means error. Artifact means not real. Artifact means shut up and keep working. He came back an hour later with a travel mug and that hungry look he got when there might be money at the end of something. Clients on board tomorrow, he said. Museum guy. Wants to see the moment we find it. Great, I said. And I meant it the way you mean it when somebody tells you you've got a cavity. So we're doing this as a performance. Danton pointed at me like I was the problem. We're doing this as a business. Don't get cute. I'm not getting cute, I said. I'm getting accurate. That signal shouldn't exist. Nothing should exist, he snapped. We work on an ocean. You know what exists? Contracts. And then, because he couldn't help himself, he added, and if you say woke up on a hot mic in front of the client, I will personally make sure you never work another deck again. He left me alone with my headphones, my list of artifacts, and a ping that kept tapping at my skull like it had my name on it. We ran out to the coordinates on a workboat that smelled like diesel and old bait. Not a slick research vessel with white paint and sponsor logos. A working boat. Scarred deck, rust weeping down the rails, rubber bumpers chewed up from kissing docks too hard. The kind of boat where everything is zip-tied because nobody has time to do it pretty. The sea was flat and gray, the kind of flat that makes you feel watched. No wind, no swell, just a sheet of water like metal. You see that sometimes and people think it looks calm. It doesn't. Calm ocean feels wrong. It's like a dog that doesn't breathe. I sat in my container with the headphones on and listened to the pings, watching the bearings shift as we moved. Hydrophone array trailing behind us like a tail of black cables and weights, each sensor drinking sound out of the water. You learn to hear the ocean like you learn to hear a city. Engines become background. Wave slap becomes background. The subtle stuff starts sticking out. A distant shipping lane rumble. A shrimp crackle in the surface layer. A low, slow groan of the continental shelf like it's settling in its sleep. Then ping. Then the whisper. It got clearer the closer we got. 396 old. I took the headphones off and my ears still rang like someone had snapped a rubber band inside my head. I put them back on because that's what you do. You don't act scared on a paid deck. You don't give Danton a reason to point at you and say liability. On deck, the crew moved like they were bored. That's another trick. Everyone acts bored until they're not. Kale, our ROV pilot, was leaning against a crate smoking like he had all day. Kale was one of those guys who treated deep water like a game because he only ever touched it through a screen. He drove a robot, not his own lungs. So he had that false confidence. Always joking, always too loud. You could hear him through the steel walls of my container sometimes, his voice bouncing off the deck like it was trying to prove he was real. Hey, sonar boy, he called when I stepped out for air. You find his treasure yet? Or just more spooky ghost shit? Just your mom, I said because it shut him up for half a second and I needed the win. He grinned and flicked Ash over the side. You hear that? He's got jokes. Must be a serious job. I looked over the rail at the water. It didn't look like anything. Just gray. Just flat. But the ping in my headphones made it feel like there was a tooth under the surface, waiting. Don't call it ghost shit, Danton barked from behind me, like he'd been standing there the whole time. He didn't like the word ghost either. Ghost implies something you can't invoice. Kale raised his hands in fake surrender. Unexplained audio artifacts, sir. Danton nodded like that was better. and it pissed me off how easy it was to make him happy with the right syllables. We hovered over the coordinates at dawn. The sky went from black to that dirty blue that never quite becomes morning when you're out far enough. That land is just a rumor. The air smelled like salt and diesel and coffee, and my lips tasted like metal from the wind. "Drop the ROV," Danton said, and the deck crew moved. The ROV was in its cradle like a sleeping animal. All angles and thrusters and tether cable, lights like pale eyes. They swung it out with the A-frame and lowered it until it kissed the water, and the surface tension held it for a second like it didn't want to let go. Then it slipped under, and the sea swallowed it without a splash. Cale slid into his chair at the control station, hands already on the sticks. He had this grin like he was about to win something. "You ready?" he asked me over the intercom. "No," I said. "Go anyway." The camera feed came up in my container, a rectangle of green-blue water that turned darker with every meter. Depth readout ticking like a heartbeat. 50 meters, 100, 200. Light thinning. The ROV's lights made a cone in the water like headlights in fog. At 300 meters, sunlight died. At 700, the water turned into ink with glitter, marine snow sliding past the lens like ash. Tiny bits of dead life falling forever. It always looks like it's snowing down there, like the ocean is constantly having a quiet funeral. At 1,200, the sonar painted a hard return below us. Flat plane, sharp angles, not rock. Cale whistled, stupid and nervous. "Wreck. It's not a ship," I said because the shape was wrong. Long tube, too clean, not the scattered mess you usually get when metal meets water hard. Danton leaned into the container doorway behind me like he owned my oxygen. He didn't step inside. He hated my little world, but he filled the opening with his body and his impatience. "Get eyes," he said. "Confirm. We're burning fuel." Cale dipped the ROV lower. The lights cut a tunnel in the black and hit metal. White paint, a line of windows like dead eyes. The fuselage lay cracked along the seabed like a broken bone. Half buried in silt, the bottom scraped open, ribs exposed. The tail was gone. The cockpit area was mashed into the mud like someone had stomped a soda can. I should have felt relief. We found it. Job done. The client gets his footage. The company gets paid. I get to go home and pretend my hands don't smell like brine even after 3 showers. Instead, my stomach twisted because the black box ping got louder, and not just louder, closer in a way that didn't match distance. Like it was inside the container with me, vibrating the ribs of the ship through water. Then the audio changed. The whispering stopped. A woman laughed, soft at first, then louder, like she was right next to a microphone. It wasn't hysterical. It wasn't screaming. It was normal, like she'd just heard a dumb joke at a dinner table and couldn't help it. I froze with my fingers hovering above the console knobs. My mouth went dry. The laugh had that wet quality voices get when they're too close to a mic. You could hear breath on it. Danton's face went tight. "Play that back." "It's live," I said because my brain was trying to stay on rails. "That's the problem. You don't know it's live," he snapped. "It's happening between pings," I said. "It's not in the recorded pulse. It's riding the signal. It's now." Danton stared at the screen like he could bully the ocean into behaving. "We're not leaving. The client is going to want the box." "Get the box." "Yeah," Cale said over the intercom, trying to sound cool and failing. "Let's get the spooky box." The ROV floated along the fuselage. Its lights picked out details that made my skin crawl in that quiet way. Seat frames like skeletons, a curtain of torn insulation swaying in the slow current, a child's plastic cup wedged in a crack like the ocean had set it there on purpose. The windows were gone in places, leaving jagged holes that looked like mouths. My headphones hissed. The laugh faded. The ping kept pulsing, steady as a metronome. Ping. Silence. Ping. Silence. The only thing worse than the laugh was how quickly it stopped, like whatever had made it had decided it didn't need to pretend anymore. Cale swung the ROV toward the rear section, searching for the orange box. We expected to find it near where the tail should have been, or in the debris field if it had ripped loose. The sonar showed a dense object half buried beside what looked like a torn luggage container. Got a hard little nugget, Kale said. Right here, the ROV's manipulator claw descended. It scraped silt. The camera feed filled with brown clouds and little pale things tumbling in the current. Worms, tiny shrimp, fragments of something that used to be soft. The silt didn't act like normal silt. It clumped, then peeled away in sheets like wet paper. Kale dug again. The claw hit something hard and orange. The moment the box came into view, the whole audio channel on my board filled with voices, overlapping. Not garbled, not muffled, clear enough that I could pick out words like they were being spoken in the room with me. Don't open it. Stop the fucking. We can see you. I slammed the gain down so hard my knuckles cracked. My hands moved on autopilot. The voices didn't quiet the way they should have when I cut volume. They stayed just smaller, like they moved from the speakers into the metal of the container. Like the sound didn't need my equipment anymore. Danton barked at me to stop being dramatic. He said it like I was trying to make this about me. I'm not. I started. Stop, he cut in. You're going to spook the pilot. I'm the pilot, Kale said, offended, and then immediately, because he had no self-preservation, he added, but yeah, it's kind of spooky. Danton shot him a look. Just get the box. Kale latched the claw around the recorder. The ROV tugged. The box didn't lift. He tugged harder. The thrusters kicked, stirring silt into a storm. The recorder still didn't move. It looked like it was bolted to the seafloor. Probably fused, Kale said. Corrosion. You know, like when shit grows together down there. Corrosion doesn't fuse like that. It eats. It flakes. It makes edges crumble and turn into orange dust. This looked set, like the seabed had accepted it, like it had been pressed into the mud, and then the mud had decided it was part of the floor. The voices in my headphones didn't scream. That was the worst part. They talked. They muttered. They begged. They sounded annoyed, like a crowded room where everyone is trying to get hurt at once. He's going to touch it. Don't bring it up. It learns. My throat tightened. Kale angled the ROV for leverage, then yanked. Something pale slid into the frame. At first, I thought it was a strap like a seatbelt ribboning out of the mud. Then it bent wrong, jointed in segments, and pressed against the recorder like a hand bracing a door. It wasn't a hand. It didn't have fingers. It had blunt ends, like bones wrapped in skin without the courtesy of joints you recognize. It tapped the recorder casing once, twice, 3 times, and the taps synced with the beacon pulse like it was part of the signal. More of them appeared out of the silt. Not fast, not lunging, not attacking, just rising, slow and sure, surrounding the box like it was theirs. Long, thin limbs that touched the recorder and touched the seafloor and touched each other, making a little fence of pale contact points. The ROV lights caught their texture, smooth in places, then ridged like cartilage, then frayed like wet rope. They moved with the current like sea grass, but they weren't attached to anything I could see. Kale went quiet. That was new. Kale Danton Snuppet. Don't freeze. Don't freeze on me. I'm not freezing, Kale said, but his voice was tight. I'm looking. The limbs didn't do anything dramatic. They didn't grab the ROV. They didn't lash out. They just kept touching the recorder, tapping it in rhythm, like someone keeping time for a choir. Then, like they realized we were pulling, 2 limbs curled up and wrapped the ROV's claw. Not crushing, not tearing, just holding. Kale swore, the curse coming out half-choked, and hit reverse thrust. The ROV shuddered. The camera feed jittered. The limbs didn't let go. They flexed like they had muscle. Danton shouted, cut the line, like this was some fishing trip. Like it was a snag. We weren't tethered like divers where you can just ditch and swim away. We had a cable, sure, but cut the line meant ditching a robot that cost more than most houses and then explaining it to insurance with a straight face. We cut the line. We're done, I said, because my brain was trying to stay practical. We lose the ROV. We lose the box. We lose the job. Then make them let go. Danton snapped at Kale, like that was something you could do with a joystick. Kale boosted forward, trying to break the grip. The ROV's telemetry spiked. The claw's motor screamed through the data feed. He finally ripped the recorder loose with a wet motion, like pulling a jar out of mud that didn't want to lose it. The limbs followed for a second, stretching too far. They didn't snap like kelp would. They elongated like something elastic. And for a heartbeat, the camera caught a hint of where they came from, a darker mass under the silt. Not a body exactly, more like a nest of pale lines braided into a lump, like a bundle of cables you don't want to touch. Then the limbs sank away and the silt closed over them, as if the seabed had blinked. The beacon pulse got stronger. The deck lights above us flickered in time. The sea around the hull still looked flat and gray, but I felt pressure in my sinuses like the ocean wanted to shove itself up through my nose. Like a depth squeeze, even though I was on the surface. Kale let out a laugh that sounded like he hated himself. Got it. Got the box. Told you. I didn't answer because the recorder's orange casing on the camera feed flexed. Not cracked. Flexed like cartilage. Like the box wasn't metal and plastic anymore, but something with give. The paint on it rippled, little waves in the orange like it was wet skin reacting to a touch. And the voices on my board stopped being random. They started lining up, not in harmony like a song, more like a crowd turning their heads at the same time. They said my name, not a guess, not hey you, my actual name, the one only my mother uses when she's pissed, the one I don't put on paperwork, the one I stopped using on decks because it makes you sound soft. I felt cold sweat slide down my back under my shirt. I looked at Danton. His face had that blank, hungry focus he got when money was happening. He didn't react, like he didn't hear it. I pointed at my headphones with a shaking finger. You hearing that? He frowned. Hearing what? That hit me harder than the voices. Because if he couldn't hear it, then it wasn't just in the water. It wasn't just in the equipment. It was in me, or he was lying. Danton loved lying. He lied the way other people breathed. He lied to clients, to inspectors, to crew, to himself. He lied to make problems smaller. He lied because if you name something, you have to deal with it. Don't start, he said quietly, and there was threat under it. Don't make this about your whatever. My whatever, I said, and my voice came out louder than I meant. It just said my name. Then you're tired, he snapped. Then you're spooked. Then you need to drink water and shut the fuck up. Drink water. Like that was funny. Like the ocean was a joke. Kale didn't help. Maybe it's like an old recording? Like the pilot had your name? You ever fly this airline? I stared at the screen. No. He shrugged like that solved it. Then who knows? Exactly. The winch started hauling the recorder up in a sealed basket. The ROV rose with it, lights fading as it climbed through dark layers. The ping kept tapping, steady and patient. I realized my own breathing had synced to it without me noticing. Inhale between pings. Exhale on the ping, like my body wanted to match it. When the recorder broke the surface, it should have looked like every other black box I'd ever seen. Scratched, barnacled, dead. This one steamed. Not from sun. It was overcast. It steamed like it was warm inside, like it had been pulled out of an oven instead of a grave. They hauled it on a deck with gloves like it might bite. The crew gathered around because curiosity makes people stupid. Somebody cracked a joke. Somebody always cracks a joke because silence feels like admitting you're scared. Hot lunch, one deckhand said and laughed too hard. Another leaned in and went, yo, it's clean. Look at that. He was right. The recorder's casing had no barnacles, no growth, no corrosion. It looked freshly painted except where the ROV claw had scraped it. In those scrape marks, the orange layer peeled like skin and revealed something pale underneath, fibrous, wet like cartilage. I stepped closer and the smell hit me. Low tide and copper, like blood diluted with seawater, like a fish that's been left in the sun, except colder. The kind of smell that makes your throat tighten because your body knows it shouldn't be breathing it. One of the deckhands, young guy, first season offshore, still had that soft look around the eyes. leaned in with his finger hovering like he couldn't help himself. Danton snapped at him to back off, acting like he cared about safety when he only cared about liability. Hands off. This is evidence. This is property. Property. He said it like the ocean had delivered him a prize. Bring it into the container, I said, because my job was download, verify, deliver. I wanted it off the open deck. I wanted walls between it and the crew. I wanted to pretend steel meant anything out here. Danton nodded, but he didn't look at me. He was already in client mode, even with no client present, rehearsing the story he'd tell. We'll get the footage of it on deck. Then we do the download. Then we call it in. Easy. Nothing is easy once the ocean touches it. They carried it like a sacred thing, like a bomb, like a baby. I held the container door open and watched the recorder pass by my face. Close enough to see the surface wasn't smooth paint. It had tiny pores like skin. Close enough to see the orange wasn't uniform. There were faint darker lines under it, like veins. The moment it crossed the threshold into my little metal room, the air felt heavier. The cheap AC unit choked and then kicked on harder, like it sensed a fever. The console screens flickered for a second. Danton stood in the doorway again, filling it with his body. You're going to download it and tell me what's on it. No bullshit. No drama. I'm going to do my job, I said. He jabbed a finger in my chest. And you're not going to touch it with your bare hands. You hear me? Gloves. Full protocol. I don't want you coming back with some rash and telling me it's sea curses. Yeah, I said, because I didn't have the energy to argue about curses. I didn't believe in curses. I believed in pressure and bacteria and men who didn't listen. Danton left, and I bolted the container door behind him because I needed the click of the latch like I needed a breath. I set the recorder on the bench. It didn't thud like a metal box. It landed with a soft, wet weight like a sandbag. My gloves squeaked on its surface. It was warmer than it should have been. Not hot, but alive warm. Like holding a mug that's been sitting in your hands too long. I plugged it into my interface rig. The port didn't fit at first. I leaned in, annoyed, and tried again. I've downloaded 100 of these, different models, different ports, different adapters. You learn the feel. You learn how much pressure is click and how much is break it. This time, the recorder softened around the connector. Not mechanically, not like a spring giving way. It gave like flesh. I froze with my hand on the plug, feeling that little moment of resistance shift into acceptance, like the recorder had swallowed the connector and decided it liked it. I told myself it was my imagination. I told myself the gloves made it feel weird. I told myself a lot of things. The file list populated on my screen, and my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up into the trash can by my chair. The timestamps weren't 1987. They were today. They were this week. They were marked with the exact hours we'd been on the water. It had been recording us. Not with a mic you could point to. Not with a camera. With the ocean. With sound pressure. With hull vibration. With the way voices travel through steel and water and get caught and carried. I clicked one file at random, something stamped with the hour we'd left port yesterday, and hit play because my hand moved before my brain could stop it. I heard myself breathing in the container. I heard the keyboard clicks. I heard the supervisor outside yelling at someone on deck. Then I heard a second version of those sounds underneath, delayed by a half second, like an echo from a canyon. Except the echo didn't match. It added things. A wet clicking, a faint chorus of taps, and then the file shifted like the recorder had decided the boring part was over and the audio filled with a crowd. Thousands of thin voices murmuring at once. Not language, more like the ocean trying to imitate language, like water pushing through rocks and deciding it wanted to be words. Under that, a slow, rhythmic knocking that made my teeth ache like someone tapping the inside of my skull with a spoon. Ping. Knock, knock, knock. Ping. Knock, knock. Ping. Knock, knock, knock. The recorder sat on the bench, plugged into my rig, and I swear to God the orange surface moved with the rhythm, the way a throat moves when it swallows. My mouth tasted like pennies. My ears felt full like I just surfaced too fast. I swallowed, and something clicked behind my throat. I yanked the interface cord out. The recorder held it for a second, clinging, then let go with a wet pop. The connector came away shiny like it had been licked. The port on the recorder looked torn, not like plastic damage, like a ripped lip. I shoved my chair back so hard it hit the wall. The container suddenly felt too small, too wet, too much like a coffin bolted to a boat. Outside, someone thumped the container wall with a fist. "Hey," Dan's voice muffled through steel. "What the hell are you doing in there? I told you to run it. We got people waiting." Another thump. Harder. The knocking pattern from the audio, 3, pause, 2, pause, 3, answered him through the hull, faint but precise, like the ship itself had learned a new habit. I stared at the recorder, and for a second, I couldn't tell if the sound was coming from outside the door or from the bench in front of me. Then, in the silence between Danton's pounding, the man's whisper slid into my headphones again, even though I wasn't wearing them. 396 old. The container door latch rattled again, and for a second my stupid brain tried to pretend it was just Danton getting impatient. Like it wasn't the same pattern in my teeth. Like it wasn't the ocean answering him. "Open the fucking door," he shouted, and the metal sheet vibrated like a drum skin. I didn't move right away. I stood there with my hands half raised, staring at the recorder like it might lunge. It didn't. It just sat on my bench, orange and clean and wrong, warm in a room that should have been cold. Danton hit the door again. "You want to lose this contract? Because you can lose this contract. Open the door." I slid the bolt and cracked it enough to see his face. He was red, veins up his neck, the kind of angry he got when he thought he was being made a fool of. Behind him, the deck looked too bright for how gray the sea was. Crew milling, Cale leaning with his arms crossed, pretending he wasn't eavesdropping. "What's the problem?" Danton said. "It's recording us," I said. He blinked like I'd said something boring. "That's what it does." "No," he snipped. My voice came out sharper than I wanted. "It's recording now. It has files stamped with today. It played the deck. It played you. And there's other shit under it." Danton leaned in, tried to get a look past me at the bench. "Other shit like what?" "Like a crowd," I said. "Like tapping. Like you're tired," he cut in, and he pushed the door wider with his shoulder. He didn't ask permission. He never did. He stepped in my container like he owned it, like the space owed him air. His eyes went right to the recorder. I moved in front of it without thinking. "Don't touch it." That stopped him for half a heartbeat. His face did that corporate thing where it tries to decide whether to be a person or a boss. "Move," he said. "I'm serious," I said. "We need to put in a sealed case. We need to." He shoved past me. Not hard enough to start a fight, but hard enough to make the point that he could. He grabbed the recorder with both hands like it was a trophy and lifted it off the bench. The recorder didn't stick to his gloves, but it did settle into them, like it liked being held. Danton's mouth twitched with satisfaction. "There. See? Not biting. Now you're going to do the download, and you're going to tell me what's on it, and we're going to make the client happy." It softened around the port. I said, because I couldn't help myself. He shot me a look. "Don't. Danton, I'm not trying to be dramatic," I said, and I hated how pleading it sounded. "It's not right. He stepped closer until I could smell his coffee breath again. "You're not paid to be right. You're paid to be useful. And right now you're being a problem." My fist clenched. "You want useful? Fine. Useful is me telling you. Don't take that onto the deck. Don't let people crowd it. Don't." He smirked like I was a kid warning him about monsters under the bed. "Because it's haunted? Because it's a mouth? Because you've been listening to too many ghost podcasts? Because it's fucking warm," I said. "Because it screamed in my..." He turned his head and yelled out the container door. "Gale, bring the camera rig over. We're gonna get some hero footage." Cale perked up immediately because attention is a drug. He nodded and jogged off. I grabbed Danton's sleeve. The fabric was damp, not from spray, from sweat. "Listen to me." Danton looked down at my hand like it was a cockroach. "Let go." "You didn't hear it say my name," I said. "You didn't hear the voices. But I did. And I know you're not stupid. Stop pretending you don't feel it. For a flash, something moved behind his eyes. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Like he'd felt the weight of it in his hands, and his brain had tried to file it away as opportunity, but his body didn't agree. Then he hardened again, because that's what he did when his body tried to warn him. You want to keep working? You're going to shut up and follow my lead. He walked out with the recorder in his hands. I followed, because what else do? You don't abandon a deck. You don't run and leave other people around something you think is dangerous just because you might look crazy. Also, if I'm honest, there was another reason, some ugly pull in my gut that wanted to stay close to it. Like the ping had hooked me and was reeling. On deck, the air was cold enough to sting my nostrils. The ocean was still that flat gray sheet. The boat rocked so lightly it felt like it wasn't moving at all. You could hear every little sound. Chain clinks, boot soles scuffing, the distant drone of our generator. Danton held the recorder up like a prize fish. Look at that. Clean. That's money. The deck crew gathered without being told. You can tell them not to touch, and they'll touch anyway. Curiosity is a reflex. Cale showed up with a camera on a gimbal, grinning like he was about to shoot a music video. Get a shot of the orange, Danton told him. Make it look good. Cale circled, lens inches from the casing. Damn, he said. It really is clean. A deckhand, same young guy, leaned in again, eyes wide. It's warm, he said, and then he laughed because he didn't know what else to do with that. It's like a hand warmer. Don't, I said too late. His gloved finger brushed one of the scraped spots where orange peeled back. The recorder made a sound. Not a beep, not the locator ping. A soft, wet inhale. I felt it more than I heard it. The hairs on my arms lifted. The sound went straight into my sinuses like breathing cold water up your nose. The deckhand jerked his hand back. What the? The recorder started playing without being plugged into anything. Not loud, just enough. A woman laughed, right there on deck, in open air, like she was standing behind us. The laugh had no direction. It didn't come from the box. It came from everywhere, like the ocean itself was laughing through the hull. Then the man whispering numbers slid in under it. 3 on 6 hold. The crew went quiet in that instant way people do when a room changes. Faces turned, eyes narrowed, bodies leaned without meaning to. Danton's lips parted like he was about to say something smart, but all that came out was see? Like this was proof. Like this was what he'd wanted. It's playing, Cale said, voice small now. It's playing on its own. Danton smiled. Actually smiled. That's incredible, he said, like a tourist. Like a kid at an aquarium, pressing his face to the glass. Turn it off, I said. Danton didn't even look at me. Listen, you hear that? That's real. That's history. Turn it off, I repeated. The recorder gave another wet inhale, and the laugh stopped. A new voice cut through, clearer than the rest. Don't open it. Cale flinched like someone had touched his neck. One of the older deckhands swore under his breath. Danton lifted his chin, stubborn as hell. It's a recording, he said, and he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. It's a damn recording. Then why is it saying that now? I snapped. We just lifted it. The recorder answered by layering more voices in, overlapping, stacking like waves. Stop the fucking. We can see you. Put it back. Bring it deeper. And under all of it, the tapping started. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Same pattern. Same patient rhythm. The sound wasn't loud, but it made my molars ache. The deck lights above the work area flickered with it like they were sinking. The boat's radio, sitting idle in its bracket, hissed and then spat out a half-second of laughter like it was being forced to. The youngest deckhand took a step closer like he couldn't help himself. His eyes were fixed on the scrape spot, the pale, wet underlayer. His gloved hand lifted. Don't touch it, I barked. He didn't even glance at me. He was looking at the recorder like it had a magnet in it. Danton put a hand out, not to stop him, but to guide him like this was a museum exhibit. Easy, he said softly. Just listen. That did it. Something in me snapped. Not heroic, not brave, just desperate and furious and sick of watching men with authority walk people into danger because they refuse to admit they're scared. I spun toward the container door. The emergency axe was mounted on the wall in a bright bracket with a stupid little safety tag on it that said inspect monthly, like that would matter when you needed it. I ripped the tag off and yanked the axe free. Somebody shouted, "Hey," like I'd stolen their lunch. I sprinted back on a deck and Danton saw the axe and his face twisted in rage, not fear. "What the fuck are you doing?" "Move," I said. He stepped in front of me automatically, boss protecting his property. "You are not." I shoved him with my shoulder and he stumbled because the boat rolled just then, barely, but enough. The crew gasped. Cale's camera swung wildly, catching a blur of gray sea and sky. The recorder's voices rose, like it sensed intent. "Stop, stop, you're killing." The words hit me like hooks. My own voice, my cadence, my exact tone when I'm pissed. I almost stopped. My brain hiccuped on that moment of recognition. Like, holy shit, that's me. Then a tapping pattern changed for the first time. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. And under it, a slower knock, deeper, like someone hitting the underside of the hull. I raised the axe and swung. The blade bit deep. Not into metal, not into plastic, into something that gave. The orange peeled back in a thick strip, not flaking, peeling, and clear fluid spurted out and hit my boots. It ran warm down my laces. It stank like low tide and copper and something sweet underneath that made my stomach lurch. The recorder screamed, not through speakers, in my skull, in the bones behind my ears. It was like a pressure wave, like being too close to an explosion underwater where the water carries the force straight through you. My vision white out at the edges. My knees buckled. I dropped to a knee without meaning to, still holding the axe. The deck crew stumbled back, hands over ears, faces twisted. So they could hear it now. Good. At least I wasn't alone in it. Danton yelled something. I didn't catch the words because the scream filled everything. His mouth was moving, spit flying, but it looked like a silent film. I swung again, and again. I chopped until my arms burned and my shoulders screamed and the thing under the casing pulped. Each hit released more clear fluid. It splashed across the deck, pooling, and where it pooled, the paint on the deck blistered like it was being salted. The fluid steamed in the cold air, thin white vapor curling up. The mouth didn't die. It kept making noise, weaker but still structured. It didn't just scream. It tried to speak. It tried to copy Dannon's voice first, sharp and commanding. "Stop! Stop! You're fired." Then it shifted and copied Cale, nervous, joking. "Dude, what the fuck, dude?" Then it slid into me again, low and tight, like it was coming from behind my teeth. "Stop, stop! You're killing." I didn't answer it. I didn't argue. I just kept chopping. The axe head got slick. My gloves got slick. The clear fluid soaked into the seams. It didn't feel like oil. It felt like mucus, but thinner, like seawater with something alive dissolved in it. Somebody grabbed my shoulder from behind, one of the deck hands. "Enough! Enough!" he shouted, and I shrugged him off with a jerk that almost threw me over because the boat rolled again and my balance was shot. The tapping under the hull grew louder. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Like something below was answering the blows. Like a whole dam system down, there was feeling it. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds, the recorder went quiet. Not dead quiet. The ocean is never quiet. But the voices stopped. The screams stopped. The laughter stopped. All that remained was the flat gray sea and the hiss of wind and the faint crackle of the boat's electronics settling back into normal. I stood there panting, axe hanging from my hand, arms shaking from exertion and adrenaline. The chopped-up recorder lay in pieces on the deck like a gutted animal, orange strips curled back, pale, wet fibers exposed. Clear fluid pooled around it and ran in thin streams toward the scuppers. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The crew stared like they'd watched a man cut open something that shouldn't exist. Then Danton surged forward and shoved me hard enough I hit the railing. My spine clanged against steel. Pain shot up my back. "You idiot," he hissed, and now his voice came back into focus. "You absolute fucking idiot. Do you know what you just did?" I laughed because I couldn't help it. It came out ugly. I stopped it. "You destroyed evidence," he said. "You destroyed our contract. You destroyed." "You heard it," I snapped. "You heard the voices. You heard it try to talk. You heard it." "I heard a malfunction," he said, and his eyes were wild. "I heard something you couldn't handle. You couldn't handle it, so you turned into some bullshit action hero with an axe." "Look at your glove," I said. He blinked. "What?" I pointed. His right glove, where he'd held the recorder, was soaked in clear fluid. He hadn't noticed because rage blinds you. The fluid had seeped past the cuff. The skin at his wrist looked wrong, pale and wrinkled like it had been soaked too long. And he kept flexing his fingers like they didn't feel right, like he was testing them. He saw me looking and yanked his sleeve down over it fast, like that could hide it. Like denial is a bandage. "Kalestelin, faccia drened." "Danton," he said, and it was the first time I'd ever heard him sound serious. "That wasn't a malfunction." Danton rounded on him. "Shut up." "It said his name," Kale said, nodding at me without looking. It sounded like him. It sounded like us. Danton's jaw worked. He looked at the chopped pieces, the steaming fluid, the blistered deck paint. For a second, I thought he might actually admit it. Might actually be human. Then he did what he always did. He decided the problem wasn't the thing. The problem was me. "You're done," he said. "You're off this boat as soon as we dock. You're never coming back. You're never touching my gear again." "Fine," I said, and I meant it. "Keep your gear." Danton's face twitched like he wanted to hit me. He didn't, because cameras were still rolling somewhere, and he had that little thread of self-preservation. He jerked his chin at the crew. "Clean it," he barked. "Get it off my deck." Nobody moved at first. The clear fluid pooled like something poisonous. The smell made everyone keep their distance. One of the older deckhands, a guy named Rusk, who'd been offshore longer than I'd been alive, spat over the side and muttered, "We should put it back." Danton snapped his head toward him. "What did you say?" Rusk stared at the fluid like it might crawl. "Nothing," he said, but his voice was tight. "Just we should wash it. With seawater. Get it gone." "Seawater? Yeah, great idea. Wash the ocean thing with more ocean." I stepped away from the railing and looked out at the gray, flat surface. It stared back like a dead eye. We headed back to port on a long, ugly ride. The boat's mood shifted in a way you can feel on the skin. Nobody joked. Nobody talked much. The deck crew avoided the area where the fluid had pooled even after they scrubbed it. They used seawater and detergent and a stiff brush, and still the paint in that patch looked blistered and scabbed. The pieces of the recorder got bagged and shoved into a metal bin with a lid like it was hazardous waste. Danton ordered it locked in the storage locker. He tried to act like he was controlling the situation, but every time his right hand flexed, he flinched. He kept rubbing his fingers together like he couldn't feel the texture of his own skin. Kale sat near his control station, staring at the blank screens like he was waiting for the ocean to talk again. When I walked past him, he grabbed my sleeve. "Hey," he said quietly. "You okay?" I almost laughed again. "No," he swallowed. When you hit it, I heard it in my head, like being underwater." "Yeah," I said. He glanced around, making sure Danton wasn't watching. "You think there's more down there?" I looked at the horizon. "I know there's more down there." Kale's throat bobbed. "We should tell someone." "Who?" I said. "The Coast Guard? You want to call and say, hey, we pulled up a talking black box that bleeds and screams, and maybe his friends." He didn't answer, because that's the trap. If something is impossible, it becomes unspeakable. And if you can't speak it, it can live in you without resistance. As the day wore on, the boat's radios started acting up. At first, it was just static on channels we weren't using. That's normal. You get bleed. You get interference. Salt air gets into connectors. A boat is basically a floating bundle of problems. Then, during a routine check-in, the radio hissed, and a woman laughed for half a second, bright and normal, like she was in a kitchen. Danton slammed the handset down so hard it bounced. Enough, he muttered like the boat was a person disrespecting him. Russ glanced at him and said nothing. His eyes were bloodshot, like he hadn't blinked since the recorder came up. My ears felt full the entire ride. Not ringing exactly. Pressurized, like I needed to pop them but couldn't. Every time I swallowed, that little click behind my throat answered. When the sun went down, the flat gray sea turned black and glossy. The boat's running lights reflected off it in long smears like oil. The air got colder. The smell of diesel got sharper. The crew moved slower, like their bodies didn't want to do anything sudden. That night, I lay in my bunk and listened to the hull. You learn a ship sounds fast. It becomes background. It becomes a lullaby, if you can call it that. Steel creaking as it flexes. Pipes gurgling. The distant churn of the prop. The slap of waves against the side. This wasn't normal. A slow knock traveled along the steel. Not random creaks. Not settling. A pattern. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't loud, but it was precise, like a fingertip tapping from the outside. I sat up so fast I hit my head on the underside of the bunk above me. Pain flashed, and I barely felt it. The knock came again, slightly farther forward along the hull. Then again, closer, like it was moving. I swung my feet to the floor, and the deck under my bare soles felt damp cold, like the boat was sweating. The air in the bunk room tasted like metal. I swallowed, and the click answered. Someone in the bunk across from me muttered, "Stop it," half asleep. I didn't know if he was talking to me or the hull. The knock shifted again, and this time it wasn't on the hull. It was in the wall, the thin metal bulkhead between bunks, vibrating. I pressed my palm to it and felt the taps through my skin like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. I jammed earplugs in. I pressed a pillow over my head. The knocking didn't stop. It moved into my teeth. It moved into my jaw. I lay there shaking, staring into the dark, listening to the rhythm through my bones. At some point I must have drifted because the next thing I remember is waking up with my mouth full of blood. Not a lot, just that iron taste. I spat into the little sink and watched pink water swirl. My gums bled when I brushed. My ears felt even fuller, like I'd been swimming. I looked in the mirror and my eyes looked wrong. Not like I was possessed or anything dramatic. Just tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Like my body had been listening all night. When I swallowed, the click behind my throat had turned into a wet little pop. On deck in the morning, the sea was still flat, still gray, like the ocean didn't care about our night, like it had all the time in the world. Danton was already up, pacing with his satellite phone pressed to his ear. I heard him say words like unfortunate incident and equipment malfunction, and we have usable footage. He was rewriting the story in real time. He saw me and jabbed a finger like I was a stain. Yo, he snapped once he ended the call. Stay out of the client's sight. Stay out of everyone's sight. You're going to do what you're told, and then you're off. Whatever, I said, because arguing with him felt pointless. He stepped closer. His right hand was bare now. No glove. He held it behind his back like he didn't want me to see it. Give me your drive, he said. My what? The storage drive, he hissed. If you recorded any of this, I want it. I didn't record your circus, I said. His eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me. I laughed again, short and bitter. You think I want proof? You think I want a file of that thing screaming in my head? I want it gone. Danton's jaw clenched. You already cost me enough. He brushed past me, shoulder clipping mine, and I caught a glimpse of his right hand. The skin on his fingertips looked pruned, like he'd been in water too long. Pale, wrinkled. The pads of his fingers had faint ridges that didn't match his normal prints. He rubbed his thumb across his index finger and looked startled, like the texture surprised him. He saw me looking and snapped. Don't, like I'd accused him of something obscene. I walked away before I did something stupid. We docked late afternoon. The harbor smelled like diesel and fish guts and hot asphalt. Gulls screamed overhead like they were laughing at us. The land felt wrong under my feet, too steady, like my body didn't trust it. I got off the boat as soon as we tied up. I didn't wait for paperwork. I didn't wait for Danton's permission. I walked down the gangway with my bag slung over my shoulder and my jaw aching from clenching all day. Danton shouted after me, "You're done. You hear me? You're done." I didn't turn around, because if I did, I might have hit him, and I didn't want to give him that story. The unstable contractor assaults supervisor story. He'd love that. I got to my car and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, shaking. The steering wheel felt too dry. My palms felt tacky, like the clear fluid had soaked into my pores, even through gloves. I stared at the harbor water through the windshield. It looked harmless. The surface always looks harmless. That's the lie water tells. Smooth top, deep teeth underneath. My phone buzzed. Voicemail notification. Unknown number. I didn't have the courage to play it. My throat tightened just seeing the icon, because I knew what it would be. I knew it would sound like someone laughing, like someone whispering numbers, like someone saying my name like they had their mouth pressed to a mic. I drove anyway. I needed motion. I needed distance. I needed to put concrete between me and that flat gray sea. The farther inland I got, the worse my ears felt. Not pain, pressure, like my body was descending even though the road was flat, like a dive squeeze behind my eyes. I kept swallowing, trying to pop my ears, and the wet pop behind my throat answered every time like a tiny bubble bursting. At a stoplight, my teeth clicked together in the knock pattern without me meaning to. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. I gripped the wheel hard until my knuckles ached. At home, my apartment felt too quiet. No huignoisis, no whops, no radio hiss, just the hum of the fridge and distant traffic. The silence made the tapping inside my head louder. I dropped my bag and went straight to the bathroom and ran water in the sink until it was hot enough to steam. I splashed my face and tasted metal. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Unknown number. I threw it onto the couch like it was a snake. I tried to distract myself. I turned on the TV. The voices on the screen sounded wrong. Too crisp, too separated, like they weren't really in the room. I turned it off. I poured a drink. The first swallow burned, then the wet pop behind my throat answered, and I almost gagged. I stood at my kitchen counter, staring at nothing, listening. At first, nothing. Then, faintly from somewhere, maybe the pipes in the wall, maybe the building settling, I heard a tap. 1, then 3, then 2, then 3. I slammed my palm against the wall like I could punish it. "Stop," I said out loud to an empty kitchen. The wall didn't answer. The tapping moved. It slid into the sink drain, a hollow little knock like something tapping the underside of porcelain. I grabbed my keys and left. I drove to an urgent care because I couldn't think of anything else that felt like control. I walked in with salt still crusted at the corners of my mouth and told the nurse I had an ear infection. I lied with a straight face because I've lied my whole working life. I told her my ears felt full, like I couldn't equalize like I'd been swimming. She asked if I'd been diving. "Just offshore," I said. She looked at my ears with that little scope and frowned. "They look irritated. Can you flush them?" I asked, and I heard how desperate I sounded. She hesitated. "We don't usually flush unless there's wax." "Please," I said. "Just please." She did it. Warm water in one ear, then the other. The sensation made me shiver. For a second, the pressure eased, and I almost cried with relief. Then, as soon as I sat up, the wet pop behind my throat answered and the tapping came back, steady as ever. In the car outside urgent care, I finally hit play on the first voicemail. I don't know why. Maybe because not knowing felt worse. Maybe because some part of me wanted it, the way you poke a sore tooth with your tongue. The voicemail started with static. Then, clear as if someone was sitting in my passenger seat, a woman laughed. Soft, normal. Then the man whispered, 396 hold. Then my own voice, tight with panic, said, "Don't touch it." I dropped the phone like it burned. It clattered onto the passenger seat. My throat closed. I swallowed hard. Wet pop. I sat there breathing through my nose, hands shaking, staring at the phone like it might crawl. The voicemail ended with tapping. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't listen to the rest. I couldn't. I threw the phone into the glove compartment and slammed it shut like that would contain it. On the drive home, I realized something that made my stomach sink deeper than any fear. The voicemail wasn't coming from the harbor. I was miles inland. There was no way the boat's sat phone number should have reached me. There was no way anyone from the crew would be calling from an unknown number. There was no reason my phone should have audio of me yelling on deck. Unless it wasn't a call. Unless it was just arriving. Sound doesn't stay put. That's the whole reason my job exists. Water carries it. Metal carries it. Air carries it. It bounces off surfaces. It seeps through pipes. It rides vibration. Maybe I carried it too. I went home and tried the stupidest thing I've ever done. I filled my bathtub with water and salt until it stung my cuticles. I dumped half a box in, watching it swirl like snow. I climbed in fully clothed because I didn't trust myself to stop halfway. I lay back and lowered my head under until my ears filled and the world went muffled. For a moment, it was peace. Real peace. The kind you get underwater where everything is distant and your heartbeat is the loudest thing. Then, through the muffled water in my ears, the tapping came back, clearer than ever. Not outside, not on the pipes. Inside my head. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. I shot upright, water sloshing, choking on salt, clothes heavy and cold. I spat and coughed and tasted copper. I sat there in the tub shaking, dripping, feeling like an idiot and a victim at the same time. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ROV lights cutting a tunnel through black water, saw pale limbs rising out of silt, tapping the recorder like it was a drum. At 2:50, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Unknown number. At 3:17, of course, another. And another. I didn't listen. I couldn't. I shoved the phone under a pillow. The pillow vibrated once, twice, 3 times. I went to the kitchen and drank water straight from the tap, trying to wash the metal taste away. The water tasted like chlorine and something else, something faintly briny. Like the ocean had found my pipes. I spit it out. The next day, I got a call from an actual number. Danton. I stared at it until it stopped ringing. He left a voicemail, of course. I didn't want to listen, but I did because part of me hoped, stupidly, that it would be normal. That he'd be yelling about paperwork. That he'd be threatening me. That would be human. The voicemail started with his voice. "You're going to regret what you did," he said, and he sounded tired in a way that wasn't just anger. "You're going to regret it. You." Then the line cracked with static, and a woman laughed. Danton's voice came back, but it sounded farther away, like he'd move his mouth from a mic. "Can you hear that?" he whispered, and my stomach turned. "Can you?" Then the tapping pattern started underneath him, and his breathing got fast, and then the voicemail cut off like something had hung up. I sat on my couch staring at the wall, jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. He'd heard it. He'd heard it now. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt sick, because if Danton had it too, that meant it wasn't about me. It wasn't about my fear. It wasn't about stress. It was about contact. The recorder's fluid, the sound, the listening. It had used our equipment like a straw, and now it didn't need the recorder anymore. I tried to quit the ocean. That sounds stupid, but that's what I did. I told myself I was done. No more contracts. No more decks. No more listening to deep water breathe. I started looking for jobs inland. Anything with fluorescent lights and dry air. The problem was the tapping got louder the farther I got from water. It's hard to explain without sounding insane, but it was like a compass. Like the thing in my head didn't like being away from the sea. Like it pulled. When I drove toward the coast, the pressure eased. The wet pop behind my throat softened. The tapping faded into the background like hull noise. When I drove inland, it rose again, sharp and patient, like someone knocking on a door you can't find. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. After a week of not sleeping, I broke. I drove back toward the harbor at 3 in the morning because my body craved the relief the coast gave. I parked near the water and rolled down my window and breathed in brine and diesel and rotting fish like it was medicine. And it worked. The tapping softened. The pressure eased. My jaw unclenched without me telling it to. I sat there staring at dark water under dock lights, watching little ripples catch the orange glow, and I felt something like calm for the first time since the recorder came up. That's when I realized the worst part. Some sick part of me liked it. Not the fear, not the voices, the pull. The way being near the ocean made the inside of my skull stop hurting. The way the sea felt like a place my body understood, even if my mind didn't. I started going down to the harbor at night like it was a habit, like it was a drug. I'd sit on the seawall with a coffee and watch the boats sway and listen to their hulls creak and tell myself I was just relaxing. Sometimes my phone would buzz with voicemails. Unknown numbers. Always the same pattern. Laugh. Whisper. Talk. Sometimes I'd hear the laugh without the phone, just in the wind. Sometimes I'd hear numbers whispered in the gurgle of a storm drain. 396 hold. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was my brain pattern matching. I told myself all the things you tell yourself when you're trying to stay functional. Then one night, I saw Danton. I hadn't planned it. I wasn't stalking him. I was just sitting in my car near the docks, windows cracked, letting the brine calm my skull. He stumbled down the pier like he was drunk. His shoulders slumped. His hair looked greasy. He didn't have his usual sharp posture. He looked used. He stopped at the edge and stared into the water like he wanted to jump. I got out without thinking and called his name. He flinched hard like I'd hit him. He turned, eyes wide, and for a second he didn't recognize me. Then his face twisted with anger, and under the anger there was raw fear. "You," he said, and his voice cracked. "Are you okay?" I asked, and I hated myself for asking because it sounded like concern, and I didn't want to care about him. He barked a laugh, short, bitter. "Am I okay?" He held up his right hand, and the dock light hit it. The skin wasn't just pruned now. It looked stretched, pale, glossy, like it had been soaked and then dried and soaked again. His fingertips had faint ridges that ran the wrong direction, like his prints had been rewritten. When he flexed, the joints moved a beat late. He saw my eyes on it and jerked it back, hiding it in his pocket like a guilty secret. "It won't stop," he whispered, and then he shook his head hard like he'd said too much. He snapped back into boss mode because that was his armor. "You did this." "I didn't," I said. "It had touched you too." He stepped closer, eyes wild. "You cut it open," he hissed. "You spilled it on my deck. You got on me. You contaminated. You held it." I snapped back. "You carried it like a fucking trophy. You." Danton's face crumpled for half a second. He looked like he might cry. It shocked me, so hard I almost forgot to be scared. Then his mouth tightened, and he grabbed my shirt collar and yanked me close. His breath smelled like stale beer and salt. "Listen," he said, voice low and shaking. "I can't sleep. I hear knocking in my bones. I hear voices in the shower. My fucking phone is full of..." He swallowed, and I heard the wet pop in his throat from inches away. My stomach turned. "You have it too." Danton let go of my collar like it burned. He stared at his hand, then at the water. "They want it back," he whispered. "What?" "The voices," he said, and his eyes were fixed on the dark water like it was a screen. "They say put it back. Put it back deeper. They say..." He shook his head, jaw clenched. "They say we brought it up too far." I felt cold run down my spine. "Where is it?" Danton's mouth twitched. He looked ashamed and furious at the same time. "It's gone," he said. "What do you mean gone?" He laughed, and it sounded too close to the woman's laugh. "I locked it up. I locked the pieces in the locker. Steel locker. Padlock. 2 crew watching because I didn't trust anyone. And the next morning," he whispered, "the locker was wet inside. like it had flooded. There was clear fluid on the floor. The bag was there. The bin was there. The pieces were, he swallowed hard. Wet pop. Not. My throat closed. Not there. Danton nodded slowly. Not there. Ow, I said, even though it was a useless question. Danton's eyes flicked to me. You tell me, he snapped. You're the one who said it was a mouth. I remembered the port softening around my connector. The way the casing rippled. The way it inhaled. The way it screamed inside my skull. A mouth doesn't have to keep what it eats in the same shape. Where did it go? I asked because my voice was thin. Danton's gaze slid back to the water. Back, he whispered. The word landed heavy. The tapping started then, faint under the pier like something knocking from below. Not the pattern, just slow, deep knocks like someone testing the underside of the wood. Danton's shoulders hunched like he'd been punched. He pressed his palms to his ears, but that didn't help because the sound didn't come through air. It came through bone. You hear it, he whispered. I did. The pier creaked under my feet. The water below was black with occasional slicks of oil rainbow under dock lights. The smell of brine was thick. I wanted to run. Instead, I found myself stepping closer to the edge. Danton grabbed my sleeve. His fingers felt wrong through fabric, too smooth, too damp. Don't, he hissed. And it was the first time he'd ever warned me instead of ordering. Something moved in the water. Not a fin, not a fish. A pale line, just under the surface, sliding like a rope. Then another, weaving, slow and patient, like the pale limbs we'd seen at depth had come up to see what we'd done. The dock lights flickered once. I tasted pennies. For six, the whisper slid into my ear, and this time it wasn't my phone. It was the space between my skull and my skin. Danton's grip tightened. We have to, he started. His words got cut off by a sound that made my stomach drop. A laugh, right under the pier. Not muffled, not distorted, like a woman laughing into a microphone in a dry room. Danton made a choked noise and stumbled back, dragging me with him. His eyes were huge. He looked like he'd seen God, and it hated him. Get away, he croaked. We backed up fast, boots thudding on wood. The knocking under the pier grew faster for a few beats, like something excited. Then it stopped. The water went still again. Danton stood there panting, hands shaking, staring at nothing. This is your fault, he whispered, and it was weak now. Not accusation, just pain. Yeah, I said because arguing felt pointless. Sure. He flinched like I'd slapped him. He looked at me with something like betrayal. You don't get to be calm, he snapped. You don't get to act like this is fine. I'm not calm, I said. I'm just tired. Danton's face tightened. He leaned in again, eyes bloodshot. They told me something, he whispered. What? They said a number, he said, and his voice shook. They keep saying numbers. And when I looked it up, I repeated, because of course he did. He tried to turn it into a spreadsheet. They match, he hissed. They match the coordinates. The crash. Our position when we pulled it. My home address. He swallowed hard. Wet pop. They match. The thought made my skin crawl. Not random. Not hallucination. Pattern. Tracking. Why? I asked. Danton stared at the water like it might answer. Because it's listening, he whispered. Because it learns. The word hung between us like fog. Danton's phone buzzed in his pocket. He flinched. He pulled it out with his left hand like his right hand didn't trust itself. He looked at the screen and his face went blank. Voicemail. Unknown number. He looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, he looked small. If I listen, he whispered, it stops for a while. My stomach turned. Don't. He pressed play anyway, because of course he did. Because he couldn't stand not knowing. Because he needed control, even if it was poison. His phone speaker crackled. A woman laughed. A man whispered numbers. Then a voice, Danton's voice, said, we're burning fuel. Then my own voice said, don't touch it. Then, softly like a breath right against the mic, something said, hold. Danton's eyes rolled back slightly like he'd been hit. He swayed. I grabbed his arm to keep him from falling. His skin felt damp, cold slick like fish belly. He jerked away, breathing hard. You see, he rasped. It's got us. It's got us. He stumbled backward toward the pier gate like he couldn't be near the water and also couldn't leave it. Like his body wanted both. Go home, I said. He laughed, broken. Home. He held up his right hand and flexed it. The fingertips twitched like they had their own rhythm. I can't be inland. It gets loud. I can't sleep. I can't. Then tell someone, I said, and the words felt hollow. Tell the company. Tell. The company, he spat, sudden bitterness. The company already sent someone. They sent a safety guy, a compliance consultant. He listened to my explanation and looked at my hand and told me to stop drinking. He barked a laugh. They don't want to know. They want it quiet. Then quit, I said. Danton stared at me. I tried, he whispered. I tried to walk away. I drove inland. 2 hours. 3. The knocking got so loud I pulled over and punched my own jaw until my teeth loosened because I thought I could knock it out. My stomach rolled. His gums, the blood taste, same as me. Danton's eyes flicked to the water again. It wants to be listened to, he whispered. That's what it is. A mouth. A recorder. A thing that eats sound and gives it back and hooks you with your own voice. And the ocean carries it. He looked at me sharply. You listen too, don't you? That's why you're here. I didn't answer fast enough, and that was answer enough. Danton's lips curled in something like disgust. So we're both addicts. Shut up, I muttered, but it didn't land because he wasn't wrong. Danton stepped back, hands shaking. I'm going to put it back, he whispered suddenly. What? He nodded like he'd finally decided something. If it came up, it can go back down. If it wants to be deeper, I'll make it deeper. You don't have it, I snapped. You said it's gone. Danton's eyes narrowed. It's not gone, he said. It's in the water. It's in the harbor. It's in the... He gestured vaguely like he couldn't point to it because it was everywhere. I can get it. I know guys. I can get a diver. I grabbed his sleeve. Don't. You're gonna get someone killed. He yanked away. Someone already died. He hissed. 30 years ago. And it's still talking. So don't stand there acting like you give shit about safety. That hit hard because I did. I did in my own bitter way. I didn't want to be the reason another crew got sucked into this. Danton's phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Voicemail stacking. He stared at it, jaw clenched. Then he shoved it into his pocket like he could ignore it. I'm done, he whispered, and now he looked like he meant it. I'm done being knocked on from the inside. He turned and walked away down the pier, shoulders hunched, disappearing into the dock shadows. I stood there staring at the water until my legs hurt from standing. The tapping under the pier came back, faint, patient. I went home. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. Over the next month, my life shrank to a routine that revolved around water like a planet around a gravity well. I'd work odd jobs, warehouse shifts, data entry, anything that paid enough to keep my rent covered. Then at night, I'd drive to the harbor and sit near the water until the pressure eased. Sometimes I'd see pale lines under the surface near dock lights, and I'd tell myself it was rope. Sometimes I'd hear laughter echo off shipping containers, and I'd tell myself it was drunk people. Sometimes my phone would ring from unknown numbers, and if I didn't answer, it would leave a voicemail anyway. Always the same structure. Laugh, whisper, talk. Sometimes my own voice, sometimes Danton's, sometimes Kale's. Kale called me once, actually called. Not voicemail, real call. His voice was shaky. You hearing it? He blurted as soon as I answered. Yeah, I said. He exhaled hard. Okay, good, not good. You know what I mean. You still offshore? I asked. No, he said. I quit. I tried to quit. I'm in my apartment, and I can't. His breathing hitched. My shower head made the laugh noise. Like it was laughing at me. I haven't showered in 3 days because every time the water starts, I hear. His voice broke, and I heard the wet pop behind his throat through the phone. That sound made my stomach twist because it meant the same thing was happening to him too. Kale, I said, keeping my voice steady because he needed someone to sound sane. Get away from water. I tried, he whispered. It gets louder inland, like it's pulling me back. I drove 2 hours and the tapping got so loud I thought my jaw was going to crack. I turned around. It eased as soon as I smelled salt. "What the fuck is that?" "I don't know," I said because I didn't. Kale's voice dropped. "Danton's missing." "What?" "He didn't show up to a meeting," Kale said. "Company called me because they thought I'd know. I told them to fuck off. But Russ texted me. Said Danton took a boat out at night. Alone. Said he talked about putting it back." My skin went cold. "When?" "A week ago," Kale whispered. "Nobody's reporting it. Company's keeping it quiet. Like he just left." I swallowed. "Wet pop." "Kale," I said. "Don't go looking." "I'm not," he said, but his voice didn't sound sure. I keep getting voicemails. And now the voicemails have his voice in them. Like he's underwater. My stomach dropped. "Don't listen." "I didn't," he whispered. "I swear. But my phone plays them sometimes without me touching it. Like it wants me to." That was the worst part of all of it. The way it removed choice. The way it turned your own devices into mouths. Kale started crying then, quiet and embarrassed. And I didn't know what to do with that. I'm not good at comfort. I'm good at equipment and procedures and denial. "I'm going to the harbor," I said finally. "It's quieter there. Just go sit near water. Not in it. Near it. And don't answer unknown calls." Kale laughed weakly through tears. "That's the stupidest advice." "Yeah," I said, "but it works. For now." He hung up, and I sat on my couch staring at my phone like it might bite. Danton missing. Danton who wanted to put it back. Danton who had the pruned fingers and the wet pop and the voicemails. If he'd gone out alone to put it back, then he'd gone out to meet something that had been knocking from below. That night, I drove to the harbor and walked out onto the same pier where I'd seen him. The water was black. Dock lights made small circles of orange on the surface. The air smelled like brine and diesel and seaweed rot. The tapping in my jaw eased as soon as my shoes hit the wood planks. Relief washed through me so strong it made me dizzy. That relief scared me more than the tapping ever did, because relief meant dependency. I walked to the edge and stared down. The water swayed slightly, and beneath it I saw nothing but darkness. Then, faintly, just under the surface, a pale line slid through the light circle like a ribbon. Another followed, then another. I stepped back automatically. My phone buzzed. Voicemail. Unknown number. I didn't touch it. I didn't play it. I shoved it into my pocket like a talisman. The water made a sound. Not a wave. Not a splash. A soft, wet inhale. Like something breathing right below the surface. The laugh came next, quiet, like someone laughing into their hand to keep from being heard. I backed up, heart hammering, and the tapping started again, not on my jaw, under my feet. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. The pier planks vibrated with it, subtle but precise. My knees went weak. My mouth filled with metal taste. I turned and ran. I ran off the pier, off the dock, across the parking lot, and didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked and my breathing fogging the windshield. I sat there panting, hands shaking, staring at the dark water between parked boats like it could reach through glass. My phone buzzed again, and this time, without me touching it, it started playing. Voicemail audio leaked from the speaker, thin and tinny, but clear. A woman laughed. A man whispered numbers. Then Danton's voice, muffled, like it was coming through water. "You can have it back," he said. "You can." There was a sound like water rushing past a mic. A wet thud. A choked inhale. Then Danton whispered, quieter, like he was trying to be heard without being noticed. "It's inside my throat," he said, and my stomach lurched. The tapping pattern started under him, and his breathing turned into gurgles. I slapped the phone screen, trying to stop it. It kept playing. Then another voice slid in under Danton's, calm and close. My own voice. "Hold," it said. I froze, because I hadn't said that word. Not on deck, not in the container, not anywhere. The voicemail ended with one last soft inhale, like something satisfied. My hand shook so hard I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. I stared at it like it was a creature. The tapping in my jaw returned, slow and patient. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. I drove home with my teeth clenched and my ears full. At home, I didn't turn on lights. I didn't want reflections. I didn't want to see myself in a dark window and wonder if the ocean had saved a copy. I sat on my couch and stared at my hands. They looked normal, maybe a little dry, maybe a little cracked from salt. But when I rubbed my thumb across my index fingertip, I felt a faint ridge I didn't recognize. Like the skin pattern had shifted, like something had rewritten the map. I went to the bathroom and looked at my throat with a flashlight like an idiot. Pink flesh. Normal. No palefibers. No mouth inside a mouth. Then when I swallowed, the wet pop behind my throat answered and it felt closer. Not behind. Not deep. Closer to the surface, like a bubble rising. I backed away from the mirror and turned off the light because I couldn't stand looking. I tried to quit again. I tried to stop going to the harbor. I tried to stay inland. It got worse. The tapping grew louder in dry places. In grocery stores, I'd hear it faintly in the fluorescent hum. In my office job, I'd feel in the desk when someone typed. In my apartment, I'd hear it in the radiator pipes even when they weren't on. 3 taps, 2 taps, 3 taps, always the same. Sometimes the laugh would slip into the sound of running water in a sink. Sometimes numbers would whisper in the white noise of a fan. 396 old. I stopped sleeping. Sleep became this thing you almost touch and then lose when your jaw clicks or your ears fill or your phone buzzes. After a while, you stop feeling like a person and start feeling like a sensor. Like equipment that's been left on too long and starts hallucinating signals. One afternoon, I got an email from the company. Not from Danton, from corporate. Generic address. Cold language. It said my contract was terminated for destruction of equipment and unprofessional conduct. It said any further communication should go through legal. At the bottom, in a different font, like an accidental paste, there was a string of numbers. 39.6. Hold. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grip my desk. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. I refreshed. The numbers were still there. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence. A formatting error. A weird footer. Then my computer speakers popped softly, and I heard a woman laugh just once. I slammed the laptop shut and walked out of the office without telling anyone. I didn't go back. That night, I drove to the coast like I always did now when things got too loud. I parked near a rocky breakwater where waves slapped stones hard enough to spray salt into the air. The sound was loud, chaotic, constant good. The ocean noise could smother the tapping sometimes, like a bigger sound drowning the smaller one. I climbed out and walked toward the rocks, hands in pockets, shoulders hunched against wind. The waves were cold and aggressive, black water crashing and pulling back like breath. I sat on a rock and listened. For a while, nothing but the ocean. Then, in the hiss between waves, the whisper came, softer than ever. Oh, just that word. I stared out at the dark water and felt something in my chest twist. Hold. Hold your breath. Hold your position. Hold the recorder. Hold the connection. Hold. A wave crashed hard enough to spray my face. Salt on my lips. Metal taste. I blinked, and for a second, the surface of the water didn't look like water. It looked like glass reflecting a sky that wasn't there. A deeper dark, like looking down a shaft. I stood up too fast and almost slipped. Down near the base of the rocks, something pale moved in the surge. Not foam, not kelp. A line, smooth and blunt-ended, rising and falling with the waves like it was testing the shore. Another appeared beside it. Then another. My heart hammered. They weren't reaching. They weren't grabbing. They were just there, like hands waiting for you to decide. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I didn't need to look. I backed away from the rocks, and the pale lines slipped back under the surface like they'd never been. I got in my car and drove with my jaw clenched and my ears full and my throat clicking. That was when I realized the ending wasn't going to be dramatic. No final battle. No clean exorcism. Just a slow shift of what I consider normal until one day I'm not sure which sound are mine and which belong to something that learned me. The worst part is this. Sometimes late at night, when I'm almost asleep, I catch myself holding my breath. Not because I'm scared, because some sick part of me expects to hear my own breathing recorded back half a second later, cleaner and closer, like the sea already saved a copy of me, and it's just waiting for the right moment to hit play. And lately, this is new, I've started waking up with wet lips like I've been underwater. Not drool, not sweat, salt. I'll sit up in bed and taste it, and my phone will be on the floor with the voicemail screen open even though I didn't touch it. And from somewhere deep in the building, pipes, foundation, the earth itself, I'll feel 3 taps, then 2, then 3, patient as a lighthouse blink. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. If I drive to the harbor, it eases. If I stay inland, it grows louder. And now, when I'm at the water, sometimes I swear I can feel something listening back through the soles of my feet, like the ocean is waiting for me to decide whether I'm going to keep running or whether I'm going to stop fighting and let it take the last thing it wants. My name, my breath, my voice. Hold.